24 years, Judge Evelyn Hardwick ruled over Jefferson County Courthouse in Birmingham, Alabama, with an iron grip. She had built a reputation as a no-nonsense, by-the-book judge, but those who worked inside the system knew better. Her courtroom was not a place of justice, it was a stage for her power. Hardwick never raised her voice. She never needed to. Her authority was woven into every word she spoke, every ruling she made, every cold glance she gave from behind her reading glasses. She dismissed attorneys with a flick of her wrist, cut off arguments before they could be made, and had no patience for challenges to her authority. Attorneys in Jefferson County had long learned to tread carefully in her courtroom. Prosecutors rarely lost cases under her watch, and those who did were quick to learn that their future in her courtroom depended on falling in line. She had a pattern, one that couldn't be officially proven but was whispered about in hallways, at bar association meetings, and in the quiet corners of legal offices. The pattern was simple cases involving black defendants rarely stood a chance. Over the years, lawyers noticed how her rulings always seemed to lean in favor of the prosecution. Objections raised by black defense attorneys were often overruled before they could finish their sentences. White attorneys, on the other hand, were treated with calculated patience. She never said anything outright, never left any smoking gun of racism or corruption. But her bias was undeniable. Attorneys, defendants, even reporters covering trials in her courtroom saw the same thing again and again, cases where the evidence was flimsy at best, yet still resulted in guilty verdicts. Appeals went unheard, sentences were harsh, lives were destroyed with the bang of her gavel. Yet nobody challenged her. Why? Because she was untouchable. Judge Hardwick had deep connections in the judicial system. She was respected in legal circles and had a network of powerful allies who shielded her from scrutiny. Prosecutors, law clerks, and even other judges had learned that questioning her authority came with consequences. If a lawyer pushed too hard, they found themselves struggling to get favorable rulings in future cases. If a journalist wrote a piece that hinted at her unfairness, access to court documents suddenly became much harder to obtain. For 24 years, her reign remained unchallenged. Attorneys who represented black clients in her courtroom knew exactly what they were up against. They walked in with the weight of history on their shoulders, knowing that justice had already been decided before they spoke a word. And yet, despite the whispers of bias, the grumbles of unfairness, the hushed conversations about the lives she ruined, no one had ever dared to go after her. Not until Marcus Carter walked into her courtroom, and for the first time in her career, Judge Evelyn Hardwick was about to lose control. Marcus Carter never took the easy cases. At 48 years old, he had built his career on defending those who had been chewed up and spit out by the system, the cases no one wanted, the ones already rigged before they even reached the courtroom. He didn't do it for fame, he didn't do it for money. He did it because someone had to fight back. His reputation stretched far beyond Alabama. Prosecutors hated seeing his name on the docket. He was the kind of attorney who could take a hopeless case and tear it apart, until it was clear that the prosecution's argument had never held weight in the first place. But today was different. Today he wasn't just defending another falsely accused black man. Today he was here to put an end to the woman who had spent decades weaponizing her power against people like him and his clients. The man sitting beside him at the defense table, Jordan Tate, was just one of many who had been wrongfully dragged into Hardwick's courtroom. The official charge, armed robbery. The real crime, being a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jordan was 32 years old, a father of two, with no criminal record. But when a gas station robbery occurred, he was the first suspect, despite the lack of physical evidence linking him to the crime. Marcus had seen it 1,000 times before. The state's case was weak, but it didn't matter. The jury had been chosen carefully, a majority white jury, the kind that Hardwick preferred. The prosecutor, Ryan Lockwood, was a young, ambitious attorney, eager to impress the system that had groomed him. Marcus had been inside Hardwick's courtroom before. He knew how it worked, and today, he was done playing by her rules. As he walked into the courtroom, he could already feel Hardwick's hatred, not because of the case, not because of anything he had said, but because he was Marcus Carter, a black defense attorney who refused to bow to her authority. She had tried to break him before, cutting him off in court, overruling his objections without explanation, making it clear that his words meant nothing in her courtroom. But today, She had no idea what was coming. Jordan sat beside him, shoulders hunched forward, the weight of his life resting in Marcus's hands. Marcus leaned in slightly, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "We're ready." He wasn't just here to defend Jordan Tate. He was here to make sure Judge Evelyn Hardwick never handed down another biased ruling again. From the moment Marcus Carter stepped into Judge Evelyn Hardwick's courtroom, he knew how this trial was going to play out. It was never about the law, it was about control. For 24 years, Hardwick had shaped her courtroom into a theater of power, where she played both judge and executioner. Defense attorneys knew that once their case landed in her hands, the outcome was already decided. Marcus had seen it too many times before. The trial had barely begun when Hardwick made it clear where she stood. "Mr. Carter," she said, "you're already on thin ice in my courtroom. Don't waste my time today." It wasn't just a warning. It was a message one she had delivered to countless black defense attorneys before him. But Marcus wasn't here to play her game. He tightened his grip on his briefcase but kept his face unreadable. "I'll try not to, Your Honor." Hardwick smirked. "Good, because I don't have time for theatrics." She turned to the prosecution, giving Ryan Lockwood, the eager young assistant district attorney, the floor. "The state is ready, Your Honor." Of course they were. They were always ready when the deck was stacked in their favor. Marcus glanced at his client, Jordan Tate, who sat beside him at the defense table, hands folded tightly in his lap. His posture wasn't just that of a man on trial, it was the posture of someone who had been in the system too long, someone who had lost faith in it long ago. Marcus leaned in slightly. "We're ready too." But the truth was, it didn't matter how ready he was, because in this courtroom, the verdict had already been written. From the moment the prosecution began, it was clear. This wasn't a trial, it was a performance. And Hardwick was its director. Every objection Marcus raised was denied with barely a thought. Every time Lockwood stumbled over a legal argument, Hardwick helped him, guiding him like a teacher, correcting a student she favored. The jury noticed. The gallery noticed. The reporters in the back row scribbled faster, trying to keep up with the blatant bias unfolding before them. Yet, no one said a word. No one challenged Hardwick. No one dared to call out what was happening, except Marcus Carter. He watched Hardwick carefully, the way her lips curled in contempt every time he spoke, the way she barely concealed her disdain. This wasn't just bias. This was calculated, unapologetic control. And the courtroom didn't know it yet, but Marcus had come prepared to destroy it. Marcus Carter had seen countless trials in his career, but he had never witnessed a moment like this. One second, Judge Evelyn Hardwick was sitting high on her bench, ruling over the courtroom with her usual iron grip, dismissing objections like they were nothing more than annoyances. The next second, the doors to the courtroom swung open. The sound alone, the heavy creak of the oak doors, was enough to shift every pair of eyes away from the witness stand. Two men in dark suits strode in, their movements crisp, deliberate, authoritative. Federal agents. The room went silent. Marcus didn't react. He knew this moment was coming. He smoothed out his tie, his hands folding neatly on the defense table. Judge Hardwick's eyes flickered with confusion, then irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped, her voice sharp and clipped. One of the agents, a tall, no-nonsense type, flashed his badge. "Judge Evelyn Hardwick, we need to speak with you immediately." A murmur spread through the gallery. Reporters tightened their grips on their pens, sensing something far bigger than the trial itself was unfolding. Hardwick's jaw clenched. "I am in the middle of a trial." The agent didn't budge. "It's urgent." The shift was palpable. For the first time in 24 years, Hardwick wasn't the one in control of the room. The jury exchanged glances. The prosecution team froze in place. Even Ryan Lockwood, the young, overconfident prosecutor who had spent the trial smirking at Marcus, now looked unsure of himself. "We have a warrant for your arrest," the agent continued. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Hardwick sat up straighter, her face a perfect mask of authority. But Marcus saw the tiny flicker in her eyes, fear. For the first time, she wasn't the one handing down a sentence. Hardwick leaned forward, her voice controlled but ice cold. "This is highly inappropriate. Whatever this is, it will have to wait." The second agent stepped forward. "This is a matter of federal interest. It cannot wait." Another wave of whispers swept through the gallery. Even the jury, sworn to impartiality, couldn't help but stare. Ryan Lockwood cleared his throat awkwardly. Should we take a recess, Your Honor? Hardwick's fingers curled against the bench, knuckles white. No, she snapped. We are not taking a recess. The defense has wasted enough of this court's time, and I refuse to allow. Judge Hardwick, the agent interrupted, stepping forward with a folded sheet of paper. You are under arrest for bribery, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and civil rights violations under federal law. The entire courtroom erupted. Marcus let the moment breathe, let the weight of it settle over the room. He stood slowly, deliberately, turning to face the jury, the gallery, the reporters, and finally, Judge Hardwick. Then, with calm precision, he spoke. Your Honor, I believe you just denied my motion for a mistrial. He paused, watching the realization drain the color from her face. But it seems this trial is now the least of your concerns. The lead agent stepped forward, holding out a pair of handcuffs. Judge Hardwick didn't move. Then, finally, she did. And when the cuffs snapped shut around her wrists, the courtroom wasn't just watching, they were witnessing a reckoning. The click of the handcuffs around Judge Evelyn Hardwick's wrists echoed through the silent courtroom. For 24 years, she had sat in that very chair, handing down harsh sentences, refusing to hear appeals, and making rulings that crushed lives. She had operated under the belief that power protected her, that no one could ever hold her accountable. But now, she was just another defendant. The room remained stunned, as if no one could fully grasp what had just happened. Then, it hit them all at once. The reporters in the gallery scrambled to take notes, whispering to each other in disbelief. The jury members sat frozen, their eyes bouncing between Marcus Carter and the woman who had once ruled this courtroom without question. Ryan Lockwood, the young prosecutor who had been so eager to please Hardwick, now looked pale, gripping his legal pad like a drowning man clinging to a life raft. He had just lost his safety net. But Marcus Carter wasn't finished yet. He turned to the new judge, a seasoned man with graying hair and a reputation for fairness, who had been rushed in to take over the proceedings. Taking a steady breath, Marcus spoke with precision. Your Honor, given the recent developments, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. The judge steepled his fingers, regarding Marcus carefully. On what grounds, Mr. Carter? Marcus gestured toward the now vacant judge's bench where Hardwick had sat just moments ago. On the grounds that this entire trial was poisoned from the start. The jury stirred. Even the court officers, who had stood motionless for most of the trial, now glanced at each other. Marcus continued, his voice unwavering. Judge Hardwick's arrest proves what we have all known for years. She was never impartial. This case was manipulated. Evidence was ignored. My client was never given a fair trial. And now that the woman who orchestrated this injustice is in handcuffs, the only thing left to do is undo the damage she has caused. A hush fell over the room. The new judge studied Marcus for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. I agree. A heavy silence filled the courtroom, as if the very walls were absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Then the judge spoke again. The charges against Jordan Tate are dismissed. Bailiff, remove his restraints. For a second, no one moved. Then the sound of metal unlocking rang through the air, and Jordan Tate, who had sat through this trial, knowing the odds were against him, felt the weight of the handcuffs fall away. His hands were his own again. The moment was so thick with emotion that even Ryan Lockwood didn't object. He just sat there, staring at his desk, looking like a man who had lost something much bigger than a trial. Jordan rubbed his wrists, his breath shaky. He turned to Marcus, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't even know what to say. Marcus clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. You don't have to say anything. Because today, the justice system had actually worked not because it was built that way, but because someone had fought to make it happen. Jordan stood slowly, looking around the courtroom that had nearly swallowed him whole. Then, without another word, he walked out free. Marcus followed, the weight of what had just happened settling deep in his chest. Because this wasn't just about Jordan Tate. This was about every case Judge Hardwick had ever ruled on. Every innocent man she had sent away. Every bribe she had taken. Every biased judgment she had passed. This was just the beginning. Marcus had won today. But tomorrow, there was more work to do. Because there were more Hardwicks out there. And he wasn't done yet. The courtroom still hummed with tension, even after the doors had slammed shut behind Judge Evelyn Hardwick. Reporters were still writing furiously, whispering among themselves about what they had just witnessed. Jurors exchanged stunned glances, as if silently confirming to one another that they had all just lived through history. And yet, Marcus Carter wasn't celebrating. He had won today, yes. Jordan Tate was free. Hardwick was in handcuffs. But Marcus knew the truth. This victory wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. Hardwick's arrest was a reckoning years in the making, but Marcus knew better than to think that she had operated alone. How many others had looked the other way? How many prosecutors had known their cases were unfair but pushed forward anyway? How many defense attorneys had given up too soon because they knew fighting against her was a lost cause? And most importantly, how many innocent men were still sitting in prison, sentenced by Hardwick's gavel? Jordan was one man, and today, justice had been served for him. But there were hundreds, maybe thousands of others, men who never got a fair trial, men whose families were still waiting for them to come home. And Marcus wasn't going to stop until they got the justice they deserved. As Marcus gathered his papers, he caught a glimpse of Ryan Lockwood, the young prosecutor who had, until today, been Hardwick's golden boy. Lockwood sat at his table, his face pale, staring at the empty judge's bench, where Hardwick had once presided like a queen. Marcus could see it in his eyes, the realization sinking in. He had spent his entire career under her protection, thinking he was on the winning team. Now, she was gone, and he had to ask himself, was he willing to go down with the system she had built? Marcus didn't say anything to him. He didn't have to. Some fights, Lockwood would have to wrestle with on his own. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with humidity, but Marcus barely noticed. Jordan was standing just beyond the steps, his hands finally free, looking out at the city like he was seeing it for the first time. He turned when he heard Marcus approach. "So, what happens now?" Jordan asked, his voice quiet. Marcus exhaled, looking up at the sky for a long moment. "Now?" He paused. "Now, I find the next case. Because there were more Hardwicks out there, and Marcus Carter wasn't done yet. Justice is not guaranteed, it is fought for. The downfall of Judge Evelyn Hardwick is a reminder that power, when left unchecked, breeds corruption, and that change only happens when people refuse to stay silent. Marcus Carter didn't just win a case, he exposed a system designed to protect those in power at the expense of the innocent. This story teaches us that one voice can make a difference, but persistence makes a movement. Marcus knew that Hardwick was not the only corrupt judge, just as we know injustice exists beyond the walls of a courtroom. Whether in the legal system, the workplace, or society at large, holding those in power accountable requires courage and determination. It also forces us to reflect, are we bystanders, or are we willing to act when we see wrongdoing? True justice isn't just about winning one battle, it's about ensuring fairness for generations to come. We all have a choice. Will we accept the status quo, or will we fight for what is right? Because justice isn't just an idea, it's a responsibility. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. See you in the next one.